Welcome to Love Story with Lisa, where I share romantic audio stories. Today, I'll tell you a new love story. He deliberately lost the bet to marry the criminal's daughter, making his rightful wife a laughingstock. So I placed my own bet. Synopsis: Xia Qingfeng made a wager, deliberately staking himself and losing to the daughter of a convicted official. He then kept his promise and threw her a lavish wedding. Meanwhile, I, his properly wedded wife, became the laughingstock of the entire capital. Xia Qingfeng had said calmly, "A bet is a bet. If you lose, you accept it. She is my wife, surely she can afford to lose with grace?" Those of great families are proud by nature. If you dare to gamble, you dare to lose, and in the end, I too placed myself as a wager, against the regent prince. One night of spring warmth, I slept deep and drunk with dreams. Xia Qingfeng stood outside the door in disarray, howling through the entire night. Only when the sun rose to its peak did I open the door. Looking at his wretched, pitiable state, I made a point of feigning surprise and said, "My lord, why are you here? Surely you are not unable to accept your loss." End of synopsis. In the south of the city, I was ambushed by assassins. An arrow struck my arm, soaking my sleeve through with blood, and I struggled in agony. My husband Xia Qingfeng, meanwhile, was in the northern courtyard, draped in crimson robes and a golden crown, a dashing new groom in the eyes of a certain young woman. When I pulled out the arrow, flesh and blood mingled, and the pain cut to the bone. From behind the folding screen came the voice of a messenger sent to summon Xia Qingfeng back to the main residence, every word measured, not sharp, yet each one carved into my heart like a blade. The messenger said, Miss Xiao Qing Sun was herself born into an official family, and only ended up in a place of ill repute because of her clan's ruin. She is proud by nature, unwilling to become a mere concubine. Since the young lord lost the wager, he is simply honoring the original agreement by marrying her. It is only to keep the young miss pleased. In any case, he has not brought her into the main residence to cause Lady embarrassment, nor will he be bringing back another man's child and forcing Lady to raise it. Lady should be magnanimous. The messenger continued. The young lord says, Lady ought not to be petty. Surely she cannot afford to lose even a little game. The room still reeked of blood. The blood-stained arrow lay on the table, its cold gleam merciless and unfeeling. And my husband believed I was using my own blood and flesh to compete for favor with a young woman. The nurse hesitated, her voice softening slightly. The messenger relayed his words. Why fight and leave the dignity of the first wife trampled so miserably? He also says that today he has already staked himself in a bet for Miss Xiao, so from this day forward, you will belong to her alone. Lady should have the same vision and magnanimity as she. If you dare to play, you must dare to lose. The room was utterly silent. Only the cold wind outside struck against the door in gusts. Each blast of cold air crept through the wound and into my very marrow, leaving my whole body shivering as if encased in ice. Yes. In this game of love, since I had made my bet, I must accept my loss. My father had died when I was barely 6. Orphaned and alone, with no relatives to turn to, I grew up because my mother sold one by one the old keepsakes left in the house to buy food and clothing. For someone like me, the only future I could hope for was my maternal cousin, a man of learning. Gentle and refined in manner, scrupulous in propriety, respectful to my mother, and kind to me. I was more than content. That year, a young man slender as mist rode a horse at a lean tilt by the bridge. From every pavilion came the soft laughter of young women dressed in red. A figure as fine and elegant as Xie Qingfeng. What right did someone like me have to dream of reaching so high? And yet one day, drunk on wine, he rode his horse wildly down the long street, sending me, on my way to buy medicine for my mother, stumbling and falling to the ground in fright. The red of his robes blazed even more brilliantly in the heat of the wine, and when he turned to face my white, startled face, it burned even brighter. Xie Qingfeng swung down from his horse. His white sleeve swept past, the gold-embroidered cuff extending toward me. "Miss, are you all right?" He stood there brilliant, radiant, filling the sky with spirit, as if he outshone all the spring scenery of the entire capital. The sun blazed above his head so fiercely it made me squint. He was like an unbridled horse, galloping untamed across the world. My heart, against my will, turned toward him. But the bitterness of the medicine in my chest pulled me back to reality. Who was I? Careful and cautious by nature, I knew only to live within the proper rules. My whole life, I had no right to dream of such reckless freedom. I avoided that burning gaze and walked away without hesitation. Yet that young man was the kind who would brave rapids and climb cliffs, single-minded and unstoppable, with no one able to hold him back. "Cousin, you had already made your marriage agreement with me, and yet I must hold this letter of dissolution in my arms and return it with shame," my cousin said. "The Xie family is a renowned and distinguished clan. For you to marry into that family would be, for aunt and for Aizhu, nothing but good fortune beyond compare. Shu Yu, you are a rare and precious gem. Life is already hard enough. We are like duckweed drifting and leaves falling, rootless and sourceless. Every step upward is a struggle that cannot be spoken. You may hate me, blame me, I deserve it all. But for the sake of the family's future, for the earnest hopes of our grandmother, I do not have the courage to let her down. Forgive me for lacking both bravery and resolve." He left with decisiveness, trampling my hopes and the history between us into the dirt beneath his feet. I gripped the letter of dissolution in my hands and stood in the corridor, weeping while the cold wind swept over me, a bitterness that gripped my very organs. Watching his figure grow ever more distant, I even thought, perhaps I should beg him once, for the sake of 10 years of affection, but I had only taken one step when I saw my mother, far away, leaning against the door frame, and suddenly she coughed blood and collapsed to the ground like a thunderbolt. His green robe only hesitated for a moment before hurrying away, passing Xie Qingfeng who was just arriving with a furrowed brow. Xie Qingfeng brought with him a renowned physician whom countless noble houses had been unable to retain. He stayed in my mother's room the entire night without leaving. That night, so many rare medicines never seen before, so many life-saving techniques never before heard of. One by one they pulled my mother back from the gates of the underworld, back from 1 foot already in the coffin. Xie Qingfeng, wholehearted and fervent, came again and again despite being refused each time. He kept coming, through the disruption of my marriage prospects, through the cold emptiness of our home, with no one paying attention to us. I had never done anything against propriety. Yet the world said, she seduced Xie Qingfeng, day and night in debauchery, without a shred of shame. Even my younger brother and my mother, because of such gossip, had to bow their heads and accept the losses, aggrieved and unable to defend themselves. I stood alone in the cold pavilion through an entire night. And in the end, I bowed my head before this world. April. White pear blossoms fell like snow onto my hair. There, beneath the pear tree, I handed him the fox fur-lined gloves I had made. They were originally meant as a gift for my cousin. Xie Qingfeng stopped breathing. He mounted his horse and rode like the wind 3 full circuits around the courtyard, but still could not scatter the overflowing joy shining in his eyes. His way of loving someone had always been fierce and straightforward: rare medicines, precious jewelry, a schoolroom for Aiju, a pillar of support for me. He offered all of it without the slightest hesitation, but the Xia family stood at lofty heights. How could someone like me ever reach them? The Xia family held a banquet. Lady Xia invited me, but deliberately kept me waiting half an hour before letting me in. I stood beneath the vermilion eaves of the manor corridor, silently listening to Xia Qingfeng's close friends casually mock and sneer at me. One said, "It's hard enough to grab a piece of driftwood to cling to. Once a chicken and dog have ascended to heaven, how could they bear to let go?" Another, "The young lord is free-spirited and passionate with everyone. If he truly loves, he's likely saved that for the girl from the Shen family long ago. How pitiable! Who knows how desperate she'll be when her sweet dream of wealth and nobility collapses." A third said, "Don't speak rashly. Be careful, Qingfeng gets angry and punishes you." Lady Xia made oblique, roundabout remarks, winding words that turned full circles, and in the end received only a burst of laughter echoing through the great hall. Even the young lords and ladies of the capital began placing bets on what lay ahead between me and Xia Qingfeng. "I bet once the young lord hears what your filthy mouth said, he'll whip you twice and take your fine horse besides. I'm different. I bet when the young lord tires of her, he'll kick that far-flung woman away, come back and apologize to us, and compensate us with 3 prized horses and 2 precious swords. I'll follow Lord Su. Don't forget to share a sword and a horse with me when the time comes. And I bet that little Shen woman, when she's finally cast aside, will cling and not let go. So I'm staking even the jade hairpin the Empress Dowager gifted me. I bet she'll eventually demand something, either for her half-dead half-alive mother, or for that wolf-like younger brother of hers. Or she'll demand a dignified dowry." I was like a monkey stripped bare in the middle of a crowd of noble descendants, examined, evaluated, mocked. The shame and panic left me with nowhere to hide my face. I turned to flee in confusion, and collided straight into Xia Qingfeng, who was standing quietly behind me. His eyes were red. He kicked the wine table in front of his mother clean across the room, then swung his sword and shattered Lord Su's jade cap. Amid the stunned gazes of everyone present, he clenched his teeth and swore an oath. "If Xia Qingfeng fails to do this, may I live out this life in loneliness and poverty to the end." When he finished, Xia Qingfeng pulled me away. "If mother wants to marry more women of prestigious family, then marry them. I'm fine. I am willing to spend my whole life with Shen Shuyu, without title and without status, and I am at peace with that." His hand gripped mine and never let go, not from the manor, not all the way to the Shen household. At that moment, he truly could not be without me. But later, when he complained that I was too sentimental, too dull, too tiresome to tend to, that too was real. In the second year after our marriage, in a horse race outside the city, he lost to a woman who tended horses. That woman was strong-natured, free-spirited, and brilliantly dazzling. The moment Xia Qingfeng saw her, she caught his eye. So he set up a small private courtyard, and from that very day was inseparable from her. At the time, Lady Xia was making things difficult for me in every possible way, using pretexts to keep me in the residence to learn household rules, review accounts, receive the noble relatives of the Xia family, those who smiled to my face but stuck knives in me with every word. I was exhausted from dealing with it all, utterly depleted, with no energy left to notice where Xia Qingfeng went or what he did. After a day of kneeling until my knees went numb, I only gently asked him why his robes carried an unfamiliar scent of rouge and powder. He didn't even bother to explain, just dismissively waved his hand. He'd met so many people each day. Who knew where it had rubbed off? Then he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. He never asked whether I'd been made to suffer while entering the palace to pay respects to his noble and the honored consort. The soft blades of the inner palace killed without blood. I could hardly bring myself to speak of it, and could only borrow the mouths of his close friends to let him know that I had been punished to kneel for 2 hours because I hadn't memorized every rule of palace etiquette. Xie Qingfeng, you had already used, being too busy, as an excuse to refuse accompanying me into the palace, and yet in the end you were stricken with guilt, and for several days in and out of the residence you never left my side. The woman in the private courtyard, restless from being neglected, blocked my path one day on the staircase of a restaurant, resentment filling the air. Xie Qingfeng already loves me. If you are reasonable, you should let us be together and stop confining him in the residence. I am not competing with you, his heart is already with me. You are merely a marriage of convenience. When drunk, he once said he regretted it, regretted marrying a block of wood like you, dull and flavorless, without any understanding. If he could do it over, he would rather be trampled to death by wild horses than live such a dreary life. That day the wind howled fiercely. The scene I had once dreamed of shattered in an instant like soap bubbles, and in my ears there was only a buzzing, spinning emptiness. I could only follow instinct and force myself to maintain composure, smiling in response. If that is so, why is it I and not you who stands as the young lord's wife? When all is said and done, you are only a kept woman on the outside. I lowered myself to raise you up and make you a concubine, that was already opening a path to survival for you. The woman trembled with fury and swung her riding crop at me. I startled and stepped back, a misstep, and I tumbled, rolling down the staircase. When I came around, Xie Qingfeng was sitting beside the bed, his face worn and full of remorse, each word an apology. It was also then that I learned the child not yet 2 months in my womb was gone. I was silent a long while. Then I opened my mouth and asked for a divorce. They had guessed right, but I didn't want to let them win. So let me leave with dignity. I would not cling, a bleak smile, carrying a trace of warmth in the corner of my eyes, and teardrops falling without a sound. And the words I spoke once decided could not be changed. Xie Qingfeng was frightened into pallor. He begged and pleaded for my forgiveness. He said he couldn't stand that every day I put my mother first, putting her ahead of him. Showing him coldness in order to win my mother's favor. He said he had only been momentarily dazzled by the red flash of the woman on horseback, found pleasure in her company, but there had been no physical contact between them whatsoever, and it absolutely did not count as betrayal. He had the horse-tending woman beaten to within half her life, then married her off to a lame stableman to prove his determination to reform. That low-born creature would do anything to climb higher. Don't let her words of divorce sway you. If I had truly been moved by her, why would I never have touched so much as a finger of hers? It was nothing more than taming a wild horse. She herself doesn't even understand how she ended up as livestock I've broken in. He then said, Shu Yu, Zhu will sit for the imperial examinations next year. It is the most critical moment. I have already arranged a path forward for him in advance, smoothing out no small number of complications. She knew as well, the storm of political power was enough to leave an ordinary person struggling for an entire lifetime. Zhu is my younger brother. 3 years old when he began his studies, grinding through the classics day and night, longing with his whole heart to achieve recognition and renown. Over the years, their mother's grave illness, the Shen family's decline, the hardships of mere survival, All of it had become invisible weight pressing on his shoulders. Outsiders didn't understand, but how could I not know how much he had endured? Xie Qingfeng was reminding me. My younger brother's future lay entirely within his hand. The cold moon hung high like a lonely lamp, illuminating only the single path forward before me, the path of the future. I gripped the brocade blanket, swallowed my tears, and stepped back once more. Only then did Xie Qingfeng breathe a sigh of relief. The light of the oil lamp swayed in his eyes, casting over his vow of no next time, blurring and wavering. As if about to dissolve into shadow, 1 year later, he kept yet another obedient canary. That woman neither cried nor caused scenes, docilely keeping to the small private courtyard for over a year. When I came in person to her door, she was so frightened her face turned white, her slender waist going limp as she knelt to the ground. "Please spare me, lady. I deserve 10,000 deaths." Only then did I learn that she had originally been a wretched young woman, sold by her stepmother for 100 taels of silver as a burial object. When she had climbed out a window intending to take her own life, Xie Qingfeng had saved her. Owing him a debt of life, not knowing how to repay it, she offered her body to pay back the grace. Her small courtyard was spotless. In a corner grew a few rows of fresh green vegetables, beside them climbed a trellis heavy with bitter melon blossoms. Ivy wound around the fence and climbed into the windows. The whole yard was vibrant and green, brimming with life, except at the base of the wall, where there was a pile of spent medicine dregs, staining the earth black. Even from a distance you could smell the bitter scent. Seeing me standing there staring, she said softly, "I only want to live. I have never wished to trouble lady. Every time I drink the contraceptive medicine, I take 2 full cups." She bowed her head to the ground, performing every humble gesture to show she dared not compete. I had come with fierce determination, but suddenly felt my heart go awry. If she had a home of peace and stability, if she did not have to endure a lowly station and rely on others to survive, how warm and complete the thriving green scene of this courtyard would be. But she, like me, was simply one who had no right to choose. The young bitter melon swung in the wind on the trellis. I turned silently and left without a word, yet less than a month later, word spread that she was with child, but someone forced her to drink a bowl of safflower decoction. And the pregnancy was lost. Xie Qingfeng suppressed his seething rage and didn't even bother to lift his head from his teacup. "If you don't want it, just send it away. Why involve a life?" He added that she too had suffered. How could she not understand another's difficulty? That woman, always so yielding before, now bore none of her former fragile appearance. Her face was ashen with the look of illness as she lunged forward and knelt before me, tears streaming, kowtowing with a thud. "It is all my fault. It is my fault for not heeding lady's warning and refusing to leave the capital. I deserve to die. It is my wretched fate that I could not give the young lord a child. I deserve to die. Let me go after my child." Her face was savage, her words delirious, as she hurled herself headfirst toward a column in single-minded determination, as if there were no way back. That reckless, all-or-nothing bearing was utterly unlike the docile creature I had seen a month before. Xie Qingfeng lifted her up and carried her from the courtyard, holding her close without looking back. Only then did I understand, in this world that devours people, women who want to marry into a powerful household each have their own methods and abilities. The only useless one was me. Her dramatic scene made me the laughingstock of the entire capital and lost the manor all its dignity. Lady Xie, furious at my uselessness, made me kneel under the eaves for half the night in falling snow. The next day, it was said the woman had slipped and fallen into the city moat, freezing to death in the icy water. Lady Xia clicked her prayer beads, lips murmuring, Amitabha, her eyelids not so much as twitching once. Lowly birth and worthless fate, if not for the child in her belly, I would never have kept her until today. You couldn't handle it, so I cleaned up after you. But the karmic price should be yours to bear, before I could understand the hidden meaning behind yours to bear. A high fever overtook me, and I drifted delirious because of that woman's death. Xia Qingfeng returned to the residence in clothes cold as ice, draped in white, standing at the edge of the bed, laughing coldly. You know about guilt? I thought you were so cold-blooded that you'd lost all shame. Shen Shuyu, I regret that only today have I seen clearly the iron heart beneath your soft exterior. He kicked the door open with a crash. The great wind rushed in, sweeping away all my stumbling, halting words of defense. And his figure too vanished with the night wind, gone without a backward glance. That night, wind howled and snow fell, and it made me ill for a long time afterward. The love that had once burned hotly between me and Xia Qingfeng was extinguished by that blizzard, not a single spark left. From that day forward, we were husband and wife in name only. A click, the door was pushed open again. Xia Qingfeng, draped in his fox-fur robe, lounged lazily in the grand chair. The faint morning light filtered through the crack in the door, falling on his face and making the indifference in his eyes all the more distinct. He took a small sip of tea and from beginning to end didn't bother to look at me even once. This trick is enough for one time. Her situation is different from the others. She is someone I truly, sincerely admire. If you dare touch her, don't blame me for forgetting the bond between master and student. She was indeed different. She had a proper name and surname, and was properly called Zhao Qingsun. She was not like the rest of them, not a horse-tending woman, not a girl sold as a burial object, not Shen Shuyu, a person who had climbed high and clung to the powerful. He lightly tapped the rim of the teacup. It rang out with a crisp, clear sound. Then he stood, your mother's medicine. Aizhu's future. Is there anything I have failed to provide? Shen Shuyu, you should know when enough is enough. At least I have never broken my oath by bringing her through the main gate to embarrass you before the world. It was only a wager. If I dare to bet, I dare to lose. You are my wife, you should also learn to lose gracefully. The door was pulled open. Cold wind flooded in, carrying with it the faint, lingering scent of blood from the room. My right hand, the hand that had once been praised for its beautiful calligraphy, was now entirely crippled, and yet Xia Qingfeng had not come home the entire night, not once asking a single question from beginning to end. He naturally had no idea that the horse-tending woman had quietly returned to the capital, and that last night she had come with the intention of taking my life. Had Wei Zhaoxing not arrived in time to help, that arrow would have gone straight through my throat. Blood sprang across the ground. It was clear that Xia Qingfeng had changed his heart. It was clear that he had laid out a gilded cage and swallowed all of us into it to struggle against each other. It was clear that he had let down everyone. And yet in the end, the crime was placed on my head, but ultimately, the one with a crippled hand, a broken heart, beaten into a pitiable state, that was me. He was the one who had first provoked me. He was the one who had once promised to protect me for a lifetime. He was the one who had sworn, one life, one era, one pair, and now he who couldn't even spare a glance at my circumstances was still him. The one who called me too wooden and dull was still him. The one who forced me to endure, again and again, and used my title of first wife to shield his own faithlessness. Still him. This time, I would not yield. My voice was hoarse and cold and weak. Xia Qingfeng, let us divorce. his tall figure paused. He gave a faint, almost imperceptible laugh, and didn't bother to turn around. Use this trick once and it's called intelligence. Use it a second time and it's called stupidity. The moment his footstep left the door, my words dropped to the ground too. Then why don't you bring the woman from the private courtyard into the residence as first wife? I'll yield this position to you both. Wouldn't that be better for everyone? Xie Qingfeng turned his head and looked at me. His smile blazed brilliant as the Milky Way, exactly as on the first day I had met him, only the gaze behind it was as cold as a blade. Don't trouble yourself worrying about it. Once my aunt and my cousin's wishes are fulfilled, I will naturally give you your wish. But a divorce before then? Can you afford the price of that? I've heard that A Zhu used half his life to catch the regent prince's attention. Wei Zhaoxing has offended people everywhere, and those who envy and hate him are without number. If he happens to meet with misfortune, do you think your A Zhu still has a path to survival? Wait until A Zhu stands above 10,000 men and can control others' fates and lives, then come back and discuss divorce with me. No wonder the one who had risked his life to save me that day was still saying, "We're all family here, no need to be polite." So it was A Zhu, my thin, slight younger brother. He had gambled with his own life in exchange for a future. Thinking of how the person who saved me that day had held my waist with an embrace so awkward that even the tips of his ears had turned red, my heart gave a soft tremor. To be able to control others' fates and lives, did one truly have to stand above 10,000 people? To have a name, a status, to keep one's dignity, did one truly have to hold power in one's hands to be worthy? Then this time, let me make a bet too. Let me lose once, and lose properly. 1 month later, the Shen family held a banquet, only for the regent Prince Wei Zhaoxing, nominally to express gratitude. That day I also happened to be returning home, my whole body wrapped in a crimson fox fur robe, which only made my pallid face look all the more pitiable. Amid a cluster of blossoming plum trees, our eyes met. He was briefly startled, but then went quiet, his gaze stubbornly refusing to move even half an inch. I knew this face of mine resembled 8 parts in 10 the person he could never forget, the one he had held as his white moon in the sky. 8 parts was enough to throw into disorder the battle lines of this regent prince whose hands were stained with blood. I feigned shyness and quietly retreated to the rear courtyard. But as I passed by the corridor's corner and turned my head on impulse, I accidentally caught his cold, piercing gaze, and was so frightened I dropped my hairpin. That was our only encounter the entire evening. Yet when he lifted his cup to drink wine, my wet nurse said, that wine was brewed by Lady herself. When he walked through the plum garden, a servant mentioned, that is the flower Lady loves most. Even when faint strains of music drifted from somewhere, A Zhu raised his head proudly and declared, "My elder sister began learning the zither at 3 years old and has never been idle in over 10 years. There is scarcely another young lady in the capital who could match her." Through the entire banquet, Wei Zhaoxing was surrounded on all sides by my name and this face so like the memory he carried, his mind in turmoil, impossible to settle, and I did not appear again. When the banquet ended, I stood at the manor gate waiting, but the Xie family's carriage never came. Only a small servant arrived to say, "Today is the young mistress's birthday. All the carriages of the manor have been dispatched. If Lady would be so kind as to wait another half an hour, after the guests have been seen off, a carriage will come to collect you." I stood in the bitter wind, my face reddened by the east wind. Wei Zhaoxing approached, holding in his hand the hairpin that had fallen earlier, and stood beside me. "Lady, your hairpin has fallen. I looked at the hairpin I had deliberately dropped as bait and gave a soft laugh. Behind me were so many servants, yet the one who picked it up was him. The opportunity to return this hairpin was one he had seized for himself. From the panic in his eyes when he had taken an arrow for me, to the flustered embarrassment as his ears went red when he held me, everything proved that I was different to him from anyone else. Wang Yi risked his life to save me. How should I repay that grace? There was a killing intent lurking at the bottom of his eyes, an air of danger hidden beneath his brow. He gave a faint smile and looked at me. How to repay a life-saving grace? Xie Qingfeng knows better than anyone. A sardonic amusement at the corner of his lips. He held the hairpin, gave it a gentle shake. Today this prince is going the same way. Lady, would you be willing to travel a stretch together? The regent prince's residence was far in the south. The manor was at the northern end. The two were worlds apart. This was hardly going the same way. Adults who had grown up seldom needed to tell the truth, probing each other, luring each other, until we fell into the same muddy pool together. For the sake of that hairpin, I stepped into the regent prince's carriage. The carriage compartment was small and narrow. A man and a woman, alone, such conditions easily kindle flame. I wasn't sure whether I had fallen into his trap, or whether he had stepped into my cage. We sat facing each other in silence, not a word spoken between us. His fingers were still caressing that hairpin, but those dark, fathomless eyes never looked away, staring straight at me, unguarded. I didn't retreat, he didn't advance. We held each other in that frozen tension, neither yielding, until the carriage gave an unexpected lurch, and I seized the moment at once, hurling myself forward into his arms. In almost a single instant, he had smoothly and fluidly caught me, not the slightest hint of surprise, the distance between us so small our breath mingled. I could clearly see at the corner of his brow the hint of joy flickering through. I had moved correctly again. But what came too easily was rarely treasured. I forcefully pushed him back, then without hesitation pressed my hand flat against the wound on his chest. The wound he had taken to shield me from a sword. His face instantly went white. A muffled groan escaped him. I hastily reached out wanting to check it. The moment my fingers touched the collar of his robe, he caught my hand. "Don't," he said the word in a hoarse, damp voice, still catching his breath from the exertion. I shifted slightly, intending to move away from him, but he furrowed his brow and his arm tightened, holding me even closer. In the carriage compartment, aside from the sound of hurried breathing, there was no other sound. A fragrance like ambergris, ancient and deep, wound between the two of us, sending the heart into a chaos like tangled silk threads. He tightened his hold on my waist, and inch by inch, bent his head toward me. I carried with me the joy of a plan succeeding, and inch by inch, tilted my head up to meet him. I could almost feel the warmth of his lips. My heart fluttered in panic, and I had just gently closed my eyes, when the carriage stopped abruptly. "Wang Yi, we have arrived at the Xie family." The corner of my lips curved up into the faintest smile. As I had calculated, perfectly timed, not a single step off. And then Xie Qingfeng's voice, cold as ice, rang out, "The regent prince visits the manor. I wonder what guidance you have come to offer." Wei Zhaoxing's expression immediately darkened, irritation evident on his face. I leaned close to his ear, my warm breath releasing each word. "Repaying grace the way Xie Qingfeng does, that would not be out of the question either." His eyes immediately brightened. A lip beginning to descend was held back by one of my fingers, held at a distance of 1 inch, unable to come closer. In that suspended, ambiguous space, I dropped my voice as low as it could go, and spoke the most suggestive of words. I also want to make a bet with Wang Yi, either you lose into my hands, or I lose into yours. Shall we wager on whether Xia Qingfeng dares to lift the curtain of your carriage or not? He raised an eyebrow slightly, the corner of his mouth curving up with meaning. He fancies himself free and easy, but in truth he's nothing but a pampered lord who bullies the weak and relies on his family's power. If he dares lift the curtain of my carriage, this prince will let you deal with him as you wish. But if he doesn't dare, then what? I smiled faintly and pushed him gently away. Then let Wang Yi deal with me as he wishes. With that, I abruptly flung open the carriage curtain, my clothing not yet even straightened, and stepped down without looking back. What cannot be had always makes people afraid to let go. I had lured him in, yet given him nothing to hold. Whether he won or lost, the regent prince was already in my hands. Only, when Xia Qingfeng caught sight of me, he was stopped dead in his tracks. Why is it you? His gaze swept over my disheveled skirt and slightly flushed cheeks, and his voice dropped as he looked toward the carriage. Who else is in there? I calmly smoothed my outer robe. Who else could be in the regent prince's carriage? Xia Qingfeng clenched his fist and strode furiously forward, reaching out to lift the carriage curtain, but at that exact moment, his motion froze mid-air. You're not saying the one inside is Wei Zhaoxing, are you? If it were anyone else, but Wei Zhaoxing? He is famously known for never associating with women. How many lords and princes have painstakingly raised daughters, sending them straight to the regent prince's gate, and every one has come back hugging their own heads in shame. And yet you, with him, his laugh deepened, his eyes full of contempt. Whoever taught you that trick, you'd use that to compete for favor? Shoo you, don't waste the effort. Between you and me, there is one life standing between us. He was still as handsome as ever, a figure like jade beneath the moon. But between us, the years had shattered things, splitting us onto two separate paths. Even though I had already resolved to leave him, to take revenge on him, those words cold as ice, the certainty hard as stone in the depths of his eyes, they still stabbed into me like a blade, cutting flesh and blood to ribbons. The carriage curtain swayed gently. A slender hand with distinct knuckles reached out, caught the curtain, then withdrew. Wei Zhaoxing deliberately provoking Xia Qingfeng, and I was not afraid. I even earnestly wished he could see everything tangled between me and Wei Zhaoxing. The pain of betrayal, the fury of humiliation, the shame of being forced to bow and endure. I wanted him to taste each one of them in turn, yes. I had gone mad. Rather than being locked dead in the rear courtyard, it was better to drag the entire manor down with me to be buried together. Only a pity, Xia Qingfeng had his back to the carriage and could see nothing at all. You've already turned away. What are you still afraid of? The regent prince's all-powerful authority? Or the shame of being betrayed? Behind that curtain is the truth. Why not lift it yourself and see? The certainty on Xia Qingfeng's face hardened. The mockery in his eyes was slowly swallowed by frost. He fixed me with a sharp stare. You're serious? I casually tucked a strand of windswept hair back into place and smiled. Who wouldn't love a hero of the age? While you were busy being a hero, rushing to save pitiful innocent young women, I was also waiting for my own hero to come and rescue me from the hell of the rear courtyard. Grace must be repaid, following the example of those young women and repaying it with my body. What do you say? In the carriage, the hero of the age who had nearly given his life for me immediately fell silent. My wet nurse had once been absolutely right. Men, until death, are still children, They must be gently coaxed, led by strategy, and in the end held by shamelessness. Only a pity that every word and phrase she had taught me to win over Xie Qingfeng, I had now used on someone else entirely, word for word. Shameless. The composure on Xie Qingfeng's face finally cracked. "Let me see what is really going on behind that carriage curtain," he said it through gritted teeth, holding back a fire of rage. While I pressed my lips into a smug smile of satisfaction, but just as he reached out and took hold of the carriage curtain, a startled cry rang out from behind. "Qingfeng, Ji!" His hand stopped. And I gave a cold, quiet laugh. From the Xie family's own carriage, Zhao Qingsun descended gracefully. She ran to him and hooked her arm through his, as casual as if there were no one else present, softly coaxing him, "You big fool. Just a few words of provocation and you can't even keep your composure. Do you know, if today you dared to lift the regent prince's carriage curtain, that amounts to openly searching his carriage. Do you know what situation and consequences the entire Xie family would face tomorrow? That cap of disrespect would be enough to make him suffer." She furrowed her brows in a mock pout, lifted a finger slender as an orchid branch, and lightly tapped his forehead. "When you suffer for it, don't expect me to listen to your complaints, and don't come reeking of wine to find me." Xie Qingfeng, like a cat being stroked in the direction of the fur, shed all his anger in an instant. He glanced at me once, saw my face go cold, then bent to coax the young woman beside him. "Are you still blaming me? If not for helping you block those toasts, how could I have gotten so muddled? I already told you not to see me off, and now you're sulking. Come on, don't be angry anymore. Watch me, I'll do the little puppy routine for you." He paid no attention to anyone, stuck out his tongue in imitation, and teased Zhao Qingsun into pealing laughter. When we had first married, he had secretly learned a few tricks from a traveling circus troupe to make me laugh. Of all of them, the one that always made me burst out laughing was the imitation of a puppy with its tongue out. So it turned out, the softness I had practiced little by little, the arts I had painstakingly learned to win his favor, in the end, they were there only to convenience the one who came after. I quietly committed that to memory. Zhao Qingsun curved her lips in a smile, and looking over Xie Qingfeng's shoulder, raised her chin and looked at me with arrogance before she spoke. Surely this must be elder sister. Over the years, many thanks to elder sister for taking care of Qingfeng Ji. His temperament is childlike and his conduct is casual. Elder sister must have suffered much in guiding him. From now on, just leave it to little sister to guide him with all strictness. Zhao Qingsun had originally been from a great family, but because of her uncle's involvement in factional power struggles, she had become a pawn, a plaything sealed away in the market by the puppet young emperor. Years ago, someone had used a jade hairpin gifted by the Empress Dowager to bet that after being cast aside, I would cling and refuse to let go. The bet had been placed by the elder sister who had died in Zhao's own prison cell. It had to be said, she and that elder sister who had died so wretchedly bore a certain resemblance, carrying a kind of incomprehensible arrogance. Even such words as these, she dared to say openly in public, so I answered exactly as she hoped, replying directly, "Miss need not worry on my behalf. I am not his mother and cannot bear such responsibility. I only wonder by what standing does Miss step in to guide him in place of his wife? Having been called young mistress by a few people, have you forgotten you are a kept woman redeemed from a pleasure house? As for you, yes, you. If His Majesty were to learn that the daughter of Minister Zhao, whom he once personally issued an edict to suppress, has now wed the young lord, what gift do you imagine he would bestow to celebrate the wedding? And in these recent days of your grand wedding, I imagine all your fine brothers have come bearing heavy gifts to congratulate you. His Majesty is currently aching over several problems. If he just follows the trail of those useless young lords and questions each household in turn, sooner or later he'll dig up a few names. Zhao Qingsun's face immediately went white. Shen Shuyu, you've gone too far. Xie Qingfeng stepped in front of the young woman, frowning coldly. These are all my closest friends. How could that be called factionalism? I smiled brilliantly. I am not a court minister, nor am I a prince holding the power of regency. Whether I've gone too far is not important. What matters is whether they have gone far enough. Lady Xie had, without anyone noticing, come to stand at the manor gate and raised her voice. A lowly servant girl redeemed from a pleasure house, nothing but a plaything purchased on a whim. Even the door of this manor she cannot enter, and she dares call herself a proper wife? Who in the capital doesn't keep a few such things? What is there to be surprised at? She swept a glance sharp as a blade that made Xie Qingfeng choke for words. Then raised her head and walked straight past the now ashen Zhao Qingsun without a single sideways glance. Shu Yu, have the carriage cleaned thoroughly. Who knows what unsuitable thing just soiled it? Don't let it contaminate the entrance of this manor. Zhao Qingsun was hit so hard by the Xie family's attitude that she nearly toppled, biting her lip in humiliation, her eyes fixed on Xie Qingfeng in a plea for help. I broke into laughter, laughing at her stupidity, her blindness, laughing with no small measure of mockery. Without sparing a glance at Xie Qingfeng's expression, I gave him only an indifferent, sweeping look, then turned and walked into the residence alongside Lady Xie without looking back once. Xie Qingfeng wanted to open his mouth to scold me, but what stood before him was now only a straight-backed, resolute, and cold silhouette. He stood there stunned. Rongming drew a long breath. When had Shen Shuyu become so sharp and decisive? He even felt, a Shen Shuyu like this was truly, finally, a real and living person. Zhao Qingsun clutched his sleeve, sobbing complaints. Why didn't you speak up for me? Didn't you say she was slow and easy to bully, submissive as a lump of mud? How has she become so sharp-tongued and crafty? Humiliating me before so many people, how do I still have the face to go on living in the capital? A blast of cold wind swept Xie Qingfeng's face, numb and stinging both in pain and in cold. In his mind was only the image of Shen Shuyu's cold, tearful face. Those eyes that had always been flickering with grievance or sorrow, tonight they seemed to have turned to empty air. Even when he and Zhao Qingsun were being intimate and free before her like that, she hadn't even bothered to cast him half a glance. He knew she had changed. He liked the current her, blazing, sharp, as if transformed into an entirely different person. But he was also afraid that a Shen Shuyu like this would truly let him go. His heart was flustered and confused, he didn't know what to do. Then he suddenly thought of that carriage, and turned to look, but found only empty space, as if he had missed something, but he didn't believe it. A person like Shen Shuyu, who had sunk so deep in the morass of the world, hadn't she always clung to him like a life-saving piece of straw? The regent prince, someone who had seized the very emperor's seat from his own cousin and aunt, how could he be a good and honest man? To want to be Shen Shuyu's hero, he wouldn't have such a kind and selfless heart. He had only done it because A Zhu had once saved his life, and he had granted A Zhu's request to accompany her a stretch of road. And she had seized the opportunity and nearly made him lose face. Thinking of that, Xie Qingfeng suddenly felt lightened. She was still pulling moves, still playing schemes, which proved she still cared about him. After all, she was just a woman. A few angry words, and she wouldn't stir up any real waves. In the end, wasn't she still trying to win his favor? Now Zhao Qingsun was even crying because of her. Her anger must have cooled by now. As long as she didn't make a fuss but accepted and yielded to let Zhao Qingsun through the door, he would reluctantly let everything pass. A Shen Shuyu like this felt refreshingly new to him. Thinking of her flushed face and tangled hair, a strange heat surged inside him, enough to make breathing difficult. He left Zhao Qingsun still babbling behind him and strode straight toward the main courtyard. When Xie Qingfeng entered the main courtyard, I had just removed the last few remaining pins and ornaments from my hair. Wei Zhaoxing had no taste for gaudiness. He had seen too much wealth and splendor, encountered too many beauties who had caused the downfall of kingdoms. If I came before him with a head full of jewelry and thick layers of rouge, I would look nothing like the image of his poor, ethereal white moon in the sky. I wouldn't even register in his gaze. Xie Qingfeng stood behind me. Through the bronze mirror, I could clearly see the softening in his brows and eyes. "There is a medicine smell in the room. Is your health not well?" he asked in a mild, casual tone, his manner unchanged. Only a moment ago, at the manor gate, we had been facing each other with drawn bows and swords. He hadn't set foot in the main courtyard for over a year, yet now, facing me again, he was perfectly composed, not a single crack showing. He had yielded, and everyone could see it. The courtyard manager was so happy he ordered people to heat water and prepare the bed, even quietly lighting aphrodisiac incense. They were quietly delighted, thinking that the lady who had managed the main courtyard for 2 full years was finally about to have her position secured. I looked at my own face in the bronze mirror and gave a soft laugh. That horse-tending woman's arrow struck bone and sinew. If I don't take enough medicine, there may be lasting damage. Xie Qingfeng jolted and looked up sharply, his gaze in the mirror meeting mine directly. He had raged before, but never once asked whether I lived or died. The words he had once spoken still rang in my ears. The manor couldn't even invite a decent imperial physician. What business was it of his? Perhaps startled into guilt, that gaze finally drifted elsewhere. It was only half a month ago, when the horse-tending woman was beheaded and her head displayed in the market, that he had learned the truth of what had happened. It wasn't that no one had tried to explain it to him, it was that every time he heard the name Shen Shuyu, he cut them off without hesitation. Full of cold contempt, but what good was knowing the truth? At most, he would send someone with a box of rouge and a few pieces of jewelry, calling it an apology, and silently force me to turn a blind eye and let everything pass. Those who sit above always act this way, toss a little grace from the cracks between their fingers and demand others bow their heads in gratitude. The women outside were always beyond their control, so I must endure and be tolerant. And as for the men behind me, as long as they held more power than him, he would have to bow his head and submit. Seeing I had been silent for a long while, he raised his chin, spread his arms wide, as if he had already conceded to the greatest possible extent. "Tonight I will sleep in the main courtyard," meaning he expected me to prepare his bed with all the attentiveness of a hostess. I turned and looked at him, a cold, sardonic smile on my lips. "Do you intend to kiss me with a mouth she's bitten until it bled?" How filthy! He reflexively brought his hand to the wound on his lip, but caught himself in an instant, fixed me with a glare. "Shen Shuyu, no man keeps his own virtue for the sake of a woman. That I could make the Xie rear courtyard have only you, that was already the greatest concession. How many people have laughed at me for being afraid of my wife, for binding myself because of a childhood oath, for losing my style for your sake. What more do you want?" If it were your father, if it were your Azhu, would you demand they keep themselves for a woman the way you're demanding it of me? Shen Shuyu, this world is how it is. If you can't make sense of it now, take your time and think it through. 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, sooner or later you'll come to your senses. It wasn't clear how many times. Again he stormed furiously out of my courtyard in one straight line to the private courtyard outside the manor. My nurse came in carrying a basin of water. Seeing me alone in the room, the smile at her lips' corner froze too. She gently dabbed at her eyes, forcing herself to smile. Lady, you haven't healed from your wound yet. Is it the injury that hasn't mended? Or is it this bond of husband and wife that has long since rotted from within? Lady Xia was simultaneously furious at the low-born woman on the outside, and resentful of my uselessness. Back straight and head high, she wore the bearing of a noble lady, and coldly reproached me. Men across the capital, 3 wives and 4 concubines, keeping amusements on the side, open your eyes and you'll see it everywhere. Is there any woman as foolish as you? You can't hold your husband's heart, and then you push him into the private courtyard of a lesser person, losing all dignity for the manor. Before, seeing how useless you were, with 100 things against it, but Xing Feng stubbornly insisted on marrying you. Now thinking back, it truly is regret beyond measure. If you still can't pull him back and make him cause a real scene, then don't blame me for using a letter of dismissal to delay the marriage prospects of your younger brother. She wore a full load of jewelry. Layers of heavy rouge and powder that still couldn't cover the gloom and exhaustion saturating her entire aging body. Seeing her hitch her skirts to leave, I finally spoke. So what is it you want me to do? Learn from you, keep a filthy, disgusting man by my side, let him father children all over the city outside. Lady Xia stopped short. She turned, staring at me in disbelief. All these years, your harshness has been no less a blade of betrayal than Xie Qingfeng's. The bruise on my knees, in the 3 years since I married into this manor, has never once fully healed. I smiled without a trace of fear. You are also a woman. You have tasted bitterness and humiliation yourself. On what grounds do you force me to swallow it again? Your son is today following the very path you once despised most in your own husband, and yet you aren't angry at him, you don't teach him, you just vent all your anger on me. Because I am a woman, I deserve to be humiliated? I deserve to lower myself? I deserve to be like you, treating shame as glory and clinging to it, you who dress in silk and brocade and consider yourself refined and noble, one step above others. Yet you don't even know that your own life has been broken for a long time. The horse-tending woman, the burial sacrifice, the Shen family, people like me, are we so worthless that we are not even fit to be named in your mouth? Are you still a woman? You are the blade this world uses to kill us, the poison men use to suppress us. Xie Qingfeng's rottenness comes directly from being raised on the warped air you have fostered. For the first time in 5 years of obedience and compliance, I stood and fought back fiercely against Lady Xia, leaving her shaking with fury, pressing a hand to her chest, needing servants to support her back to her courtyard. From that day forward, the 2 of them silently conspired to freeze me in place, preferably leaving me to rot forever in the rear courtyard. Lady Xie even publicly began selecting on Xie Qingfeng's behalf a second wife from a branch of the Cui family in Qinghe, under the name of an equal co-wife, intending to seize control of all household management, to strip my position as the woman who ran the household, to confine me in this courtyard, half alive and half dead. The noble young lords of the capital began placing bets again, wagering on when I would bow my head. 1 month, payout 3 to 1. 3 months, 2 to 1. Anything beyond, 1 to 1. Only the single bet that I would never bow, that one paid out 10 to 1. Wei Zhaoxing set down the hairpin on the tea table, raised an eyebrow and looked at me. I bet she won't turn back. Could she possibly lose? I reached into my garment and drew out 1,000 taels of banknotes, pushed them in front of him. Would it trouble Wang Yi to place a bet on my behalf? 1,000 taels, betting I won't bow my head. He leaned back in the grand chair. His gaze moved past the tea table, dark and unfathomable, betraying not a single shred of emotion. Not until his gaze settled on the tip of my finger pressing the banknote did the corner of his lips curve up faintly. His hand, with distinct knuckles, pressed flat over my fingertip on the banknote. Miss Shen, have you forgotten? You already lost 1 round. He abruptly leaned in closer, those phoenix eyes lifting slightly, and in them, something deep as a cold lake, startling me so badly my breathing stuttered, yet the cold numbness spreading from my fingertip crawled up my arm and through my whole body. Panicked to the extreme, I swiftly withdrew my hand and wrapped both around a warm teacup, and only then managed to find a small measure of calm. I unhooked the protective talisman from my waist, the one I had pleaded and prayed, step by step, to obtain. I set it on the silver tray. And only then spoke, voice trembling faintly but still firm, dare to bet, dare to lose, the talisman I keep always on my person. Let Wang Yi hold it for now. Once I leave the manor, I will go immediately to the prince's residence. He paused as he picked up the talisman, then gave a soft laugh. So the wager was just a pretext. What you truly want is for this prince to help you escape. I pretended to take the talisman, and used the moment to gently cup his slightly trembling fingertips in my palm. Mimicking the posture I had seen him hold in a portrait, I tilted my head to one side, my gaze both innocent and pitiful, my voice dropping into a soft, coy murmur. So will you help me? I bit lightly at my lower lip. Eyes brimming like autumn water, carrying the face so like his white moon in the sky, keeping his gaze from straying, pressing him to give an answer, his breath suddenly became disordered. In response, his hand encircled my wrist and pulled, sweeping me smoothly into his arms. Warm breath fell against my ear, his voice gentle and tender as a spring breeze. I dislike being used by others. But you have already staked yourself for me. Naturally I must claim back what is mine. My suspended heart finally fell, but it fell like a wild horse running mad, galloping fast with no way to stop. Wei Zhaoxing was handsome as jade. Even in his gravity there lingered the refined bearing of a gentle scholar. Even the fingers curling around my waist sash had never used even the slightest force. I was like a fish gasping for water who had at last found her own spring. I took the initiative and pressed my lips to his thin ones, my hand finding his fingers and gently drawing them down. His long robe fell away. I shed all the ties of convention, like a free steed at last galloping across the vast open steppe that was truly mine, the madness of abandonment, the exhilaration of something stolen. The gratification of revenge, all of it gave me an experience I had never known before. So this was the liberation Xia Qingfeng had always been immersed in, truly so exhilarating. At that very moment, outside the restaurant, Xia Qingfeng was sitting high on his horse, Zhao Qingsun laughing brilliantly in his arms. He suddenly spotted me stepping out from the entrance, his brow furrowing faintly, his voice dropping in warning. Today's spring outing was promised to Qingsun long ago. We are in a crowded place, don't cause trouble. The previous time, a show of affection before the manor gate, had earned Xia Qingfeng and his entire circle of friends a barrage of memorials condemning them. Leaving the emperor to confine them for half a month, docking a year's salary. Lady Xia had gone in person to apologize to noble households all across the city, was refused again and again, and had been so furious she fell gravely ill. He had at last learned some restraint, frightened that I would cause another scene in public and land him in more crimes, but I only glanced at him indifferently, then turned to leave. Zhao Qingsun called me back with a shout. "Elder sister, why go to such lengths? To wound yourself 3 parts in order to damage someone else 8, isn't that cruel? When the manor suffers, will the reputation of elder sister Shen family look any better? What is called lips and teeth keeping each other warm? I hope elder sister, for her own sake, will not do anything rash anymore." She nestled into Xie Qingfeng's arms, tears shimmering, soft and fragile. "The brothers all only treat me like a little sister out of affection. Even Qingfeng Gge only takes care of me because he accidentally lost a bet. Elder sister has dignity and bearing, surely she wouldn't block our path over something so small." At that very moment, the regent prince, holding my talisman, walked over and handed me the umbrella I had left behind. In that instant, the smile on Zhao Qingsun's face froze. Meeting Xie Qingfeng's startled gaze, I said calmly, "I wouldn't want to dirty my eyes." "I won't block your path." I turned and left, leaving Xie Qingfeng's heart full of suspicion, just as in the old days, when he would spend the night elsewhere, and I would have to guess who he was with and what he had done. So it turned out, a single sentence that made someone suffer and writhe was, when it came to saying it, this easy. The main courtyard door was kicked open with a crash. Xie Qingfeng stormed in furiously and demanded answers. "Why were you with him? You clearly know he and my cousin and my aunt are at odds. Why are you so close with him? And the talisman you always keep on you, why is it in his hands? What is the connection between you two?" He was flustered and stumbling. Clearly he had just rushed back in a hurry from the spring outing procession. That dearly beloved little younger sister must have been crying her eyes out again. I mimicked his former manner of easy, composed breathing, and spoke slowly. "Why are you acting like a quarrelsome shrew? Asking on, just because we've been through the ceremony and married, does that mean you become a dog chained in a courtyard, without even the freedom to socialize?" His figure stiffened slightly. He remembered that this was exactly the phrase he had once coldly flung at my face every time he had spent the night elsewhere. He choked on it, and it was a long time before he managed to force words out. "I only want to know why you were with him. Why you gave him that talisman." I took a sip of tea. The sweet, clean aftertaste spread through my heart and lungs. I answered at leisure, "The restaurant is open for business, welcoming guests from all directions. He is permitted to come. Why am I not? And that talisman, it's only one talisman. It can't protect my hand, and it can't shield my path. What does it matter if I throw it away? Would you really be so petty that you'd begrudge something worth so little? If you're that small-minded and just want to chain your wife to your bedside, aren't you afraid the whole world will laugh you to shame?" Xie Qingfeng was blocked speechless by his own words turned against him, twisted inside out in reverse. I modeled myself perfectly on him, and I learned it very well. He stood for a long while before managing with difficulty to speak. "Have you truly changed? Even toward me, you don't care anymore?" My practicing hand paused mid-stroke, as if I'd heard something laughable. Did he really think that after betraying me again and again, carving me hollow, I would still love him passionately and remain unchanged forever? The numb warmth still lingering from last night's passion still smoldered at my waist. And what my mind landed on instead was Wei Zhaoxing's hoarse, bewitching breath when he had still been clumsy and fumbling but pressing close. His chest was solid, his arms strong and able, even his embrace was firm and powerful. The domineering, overpowering kind that Xie Qingfeng couldn't even begin to compare to. Just as my thoughts began to drift and my face grew warm, I looked up, only to meet that hateful face of Xie Qingfeng's. I let drop a single sentence. Mother has already chosen a co-wife for you from the Cui branch family in Qinghe. When the time comes, just bring Zhao Qingsun in as well. That has nothing to do with me anymore. I'm naturally willing to make it happen. Xie Qingfeng froze. His expression darkened and became impossible to read. She has already given you what you wanted, and given your mother what she wanted. Aren't you happy? He lowered his eyes, his voice soft. But you were not like this originally. People change. Was the young lord not the same? That look from back then, perhaps it was all foolishness. His gaze trembled slightly. The words he wanted to say kept catching in his throat. Not knowing what had sent Xie Qingfeng into a fit of madness, he no longer stormed and demanded to leave the manor. Every day he came to my courtyard, and once he sat, he would stay half a session. The company I had once begged for and never received now made me feel suffocated. I could only bury my head in practicing calligraphy on blank pages, borrowing each stroke of ink to keep my heart still, until Zhao Qingsun, for who knew how many times, had a headache, stomachache, bodily discomfort, and sent someone to summon Xie Qingfeng. The person who came could only stand nervously in the corridor below, while Xie Qingfeng sat quietly watching me without a word. Only when the paper before me was filled with characters that could pass for passable did I finally look up and say calmly, "The young lord ought to go take a look. If she truly has some illness or ailment, and you later blame me for not letting you go, then what?" The light in Xie Qingfeng's eyes shattered into pieces. He said in a ragged voice, "You want to push me away?" I gave a small laugh. Has the young lord forgotten? She is also your young mistress, properly carried into the manor through the main gate. Xie Qingfeng's final probe collapsed entirely. Unable to hide his defeat, his voice went rough and hoarse. I have already yielded. Don't you see it? Why, I've already agreed to give us another chance. I've already ignored her and stayed by your side all day. What more do you want? I feigned surprise and asked him back. Have I not already made it possible for you to have a beautiful lady, first wife and concubine both, fulfilled inside and out? Now what more do you want? He lurched a step, accidentally knocked over the teacup, and said again and again through clenched teeth, "Very good," then flung his sleeve and left. He thought I would regret it. But he had a gentle outside woman to console him, and I had a talented lord to rely on. Neither of us would suffer. The day Xie Qingfeng left the manor, I packed my things and went up to Feng Mountain to admire the red leaves. No sooner, no later, just as Wei Zhaoxing happened to be there as well. Not too much, not too little. I stopped precisely in front of his tea house. The autumn wind made the wind chimes sway gently. The door creaked open softly, just so, just right. I slowly looked up. "I've come to collect my hairpin." The small attendant standing guard at the door quietly stepped to one side. At their parting in the tea house before, Wei Zhaoxing had told me, the autumn scenery at Feng Mountain was unsurpassed, especially in the middle of the 9th month, when viewed from above, with 10,000 peaks spread small beneath one's feet. The scenery was breathtaking. That had been an oblique invitation. And my arriving here today was a precisely timed chance. He stood there with an ease and carelessness about him, his robe's hem fluttering in the autumn wind, more arrogant even than the gust ripping across the mountain slope. The hairpin at the tip of his finger finally returned to my hair. I gently tugged at his wide sleeve and smiled. "May I trouble you for a cup of tea?" He gave a soft laugh and pushed open the room's door. The door had barely closed behind us when I wrapped my arms around his waist from behind. "How long have you been waiting? Why didn't you send someone to urge me?" He turned slowly, lips compressing, approaching inch by inch. I bit my lip gently, tilting back my slender neck with a trace of shyness and anticipation. But he suddenly pressed me against the writing table. "Who told you that this is exactly when you most resemble my white moon in the sky?" My whole body went rigid. My gaze collided with the bottomless black of his pupils. Right. The first prince's residence has always been under tight guard. How had I so easily extracted such secrets? Unless the man before me had deliberately let them leak. "Why did you deceive me?" He reached out and pulled me into a tight embrace, trapping me against that unyielding chest, his eyebrow lifting as he spoke. "You are the one who first provoked me, seduced me, seized me, and then refused to bear responsibility, giving me neither standing nor title. Years ago you saved my life. If I repay it with my body, that is perfectly reasonable. So, do you dare to bet?" Dare to bet, dare to lose. A clap of thunder struck the middle of my mind. The whole world knew the regent prince was a child entrusted by the emperor to be raised under the knee of the South King. Years ago, hunted by noble consort Xia, he had fled the capital, enlisted under an assumed name, and then returned leading 100,000 troops, using the pretext of supporting the young emperor to command all under heaven. But no one knew, the child that year had been hidden inside the funeral carriage that I and Aizhu had used to escort our family members out of the capital. 3 days north, he had curled up hiding in my carriage, watching me weep and cry the whole way without stopping. At parting, I had stuffed the last small measure of silver I still had into his hands, still weeping. He had said, "Someday I will repay this with 10,000 taels of gold." I had never believed it. Ships that pass in the night. He hadn't even asked my name. Where was the someday? But that person was him, Wei Zhaoxing. No wonder he had done his utmost to support my younger brother. No wonder he had treated me unlike anyone else. I had thought myself so clever in my calculations, and yet, just as I was still reeling, hot lips descended on mine, a deep, pulling kiss, forcing my lips open and pressing in with force. He was domineering and strong, yet also gentle and lingering, irresistible. Each successive kiss stole and claimed, leaving me, who had been alone and cold for 2 long years, into a pool of softness with no strength left. Outside, autumn rain pattered on the leaves like tapping blades. An autumn lake rippled with small waves through the entire long night. I stayed in that small courtyard for 3 days. He brewed tea and fed it to me. I played the zither for him. Even the swing at the corner of the wall, he pushed me on it for several rounds. He gently lowered his lashes, held me close, pressed to my ear, and whispered softly, "When your father had just died, his bones not yet cold, you cried so brokenly. When Aizhu said, 'From now on, no one has our backs anymore,' I swore then, someday I would repay you 10,000 taels of gold and find you a pillar that no one would dare disrespect. All these years, I have always remembered, but you forgot. I returned to the capital the very day after your wedding. You don't know how much I regretted it. If I had gone just a little faster, changed horses a few more times, rested a little less, could I have blocked your path right in the middle of that ceremony? But people were saying you had married him willingly and gladly, and he was so proud and boastful of doting on you." In that moment I began to waver. It was only later, when he treated you so badly. I saw you standing in the cold corridor, waiting for him to turn around. I saw you huddled at the base of the concubines' courtyard wall, quietly listening to them laugh and talk. I saw you even beg your wet nurse to teach you a few seductive tricks, just hoping to make him stay. I crossed paths with you more than once, accidentally meeting, sometimes even brushing past within inches, and yet in your eyes there was never any trace of me. Not even a glance, not a hand reached out to hold. Just that, and I would have dared to flatten the entire Sia family to give you what you wanted. But you said, the piece has been played, no regrets, no retreat. Accept your fate. Until today, at last you chose not to endure it anymore. Shen Shuyu, at last you finally see me. Every word he spoke fell into my heart like a wave, crashing and rolling with ferocity. I gently touched his brow and smiled softly. Don't be so deep and serious, you'll frighten me. He paused, then gave a quiet laugh. You're incorrigible. He leaned down, his thin lips approaching again, another long, lingering entanglement. By the time the sky was barely beginning to lighten, he quietly sat up, bowed low over my forehead, and pressed a long, long kiss there. Wait for me to come back. I drowned in that warmth, no longer knowing how the days passed. When I woke again, sitting in the small courtyard was once more Xie Qingfeng. You're awake? Zhao Qingsun already carries the flesh of my blood. Your body was injured, it may be difficult for you to have children. So let her give birth and then hand the child to you to raise. Shen Shuyu, my mother has told me, Awei's death had nothing to do with you. It was my fault. I swear I will certainly. His gaze suddenly landed on the dark red love bite on my neck. He stopped short. His trembling finger pointed at the pale skin dotted with dense marks. He was so furious he was shaking. I lightly tugged my collar, deliberately exposing the thick trail of marks hidden beneath the fabric. Are you referring to this? I curved my lips into a sharp, fierce smile. Zhao Qingsun always leaves those on your neck. Surely you, of all people, know what this is? He collapsed completely. The hand that had been reaching out suddenly seized my throat, his teeth grinding as he growled, cheap and shameless. You deserve death. He clawed with all his strength in a mad frenzy. I couldn't breathe at all, but inside I felt a triumph that reached the extreme. While his hands were around my throat, I laughed, and my hand slid up gently to the pin at my hairline. Gritting my teeth, I drove it straight into his arm. Xie Qingfeng cried out in agony, staggered and let go, his voice cracking in an anguished roar. Is it real? You truly took someone else here, in this place. It hurts so much. I really am dying, of course. The one who had sent the tip off to him was my own person. I had staged a catch-in-the-act scene to make him seethe with fury and yet be powerless to act. This was what I called true satisfaction. He was mad with pain and thrown into confusion, while I only calmly repinned my hair and smiled cold as blood. Why is the young lord so incapable? You have done these things 1,000 times over. And I have done it only once. Yet you are already this frantic. Haven't you lost your own dignity? How can you compare to me? Oh, is it because you are a man? Or because you are born of a distinguished family? Can't compare? But I have already compared. Can't do it? But I have already done it. There is only one more thing. I should make a scene loud enough for all the capital to know that the young lord of the Xie family is so incapable he cannot even keep a single woman. Xia Qingfeng staggered and stared at me with eyes overflowing with horror. You've gone mad, you truly have gone mad, indeed I am. But I fear, going mad this late, it's already too late. When you pushed my cousin away, I should have gone mad. When my child died an unjust death, I should have gone mad. When that bitter melon trellis in the courtyard swayed in the wind and turned my stomach, I should have gone mad. When I was nearly killed by a horse-tending woman, should have gone mad then too. Gone mad too late, so late that you thought I too was just like all those animals you had trained into submission. Step by step, word by word, I pressed him back and further back. He clutched his wound, shaking his head again and again. You're like this, there's truly no remedy. I'll give you a clean death. Tell me, who is the lover? For the sake of our past as husband and wife, I can let you keep your last shred of dignity. A calm, measured voice sounded from behind me. What if it is this prince? Wei Zhaoxing, dressed in black, pushed the door open and walked in. Seeing me unharmed, he quietly exhaled in relief. He completely ignored Xia Qingfeng's fury and shock, and simply walked steadily to my side. From inside his robes he produced a small packet of roasted seeds. Yesterday you said, brewing tea with 2 roasted seeds gives a fragrance that fills the whole room. I found some for you. I hugged the packet to my chest and broke into a bright, glowing smile. That smile made Xia Qingfeng feel as if a blade had carved through him. He went berserk, swinging a fist straight at the side of Wei Zhaoxing's face. But Wei Zhaoxing only gave a slight lean to the side to dodge, then casually struck with a palm into the embroidered chest of Xia Qingfeng's robe. Xia Qingfeng spat up a mouthful of blood, roaring with fury. You are, after all, the regent prince, and you steal another man's wife, carrying on an illicit affair behind closed doors, and you don't fear the world's contempt? Wei Zhaoxing only cast him a cold, indifferent glance, gave a faint humph, and tossed a sealed letter into his face. Read it first, then speak. The more Xia Qingfeng read, the whiter his face became. By the end, his entire body was shaking, unable even to stand. Wei Zhaoxing's large hand gently enfolded my hand that was cold with anger and pain, and he smiled with quiet tenderness. 1 letter of divorce, returning Shen Shuyu her freedom. Everything that belongs to her will be returned to her in full. Xia Qingfeng's pupils contracted, disbelieving, but Wei Zhaoxing was not yet done with him. However, the letter will only be delivered in 3 days. During those 3 days, this prince will personally assign people to see to her food and lodging. If she suffers so much as the slightest harm, I guarantee that the Ning Wang house and your Xia family don't expect to survive until winter. I and Xia Qingfeng both went breathless at the same time. Wei Zhaoxing truly understood me, understood my anger, understood my madness, understood even the desire to make Xia Qingfeng taste the same humiliation and suffering I had endured. Those 3 days, Xia Qingfeng lived worse than death. His throat was blocked by something that could neither be swallowed nor spat out. While I deliberately found every possible pretext to seek him out, exactly as he had once done after returning from the concubine's courtyard, when he could freely sit in the grand chair and tell me about the amusing happenings of the capital, share tea and snacks with me, not even bothering to avoid mentioning the things between himself and me. Now I imitated him perfectly. I asked him, does today's makeup suit me? Does this rouge match my complexion? My hand pressed lightly to my neck, where the love bites had not yet faded. I covered my mouth shyly and laughed. He is different from you, very different. He comes from the military, His body is strong and robust. He has never had his essence drained dry by women. He is truly very capable. Oh, did I misspeak? Forgive me, I didn't mean to imply you aren't capable. Although you genuinely aren't, Xie Qingfeng trembled with rage, but he was blocked from me by Wei Zhaoxing's guards, who drew their sabers and held them across his chest, 3 steps away from me. I laughed until my whole body shook, laughed until flowers bloomed in their brilliance. You once said I was wood. Flavorless, no different from a dead fish. Perhaps consider that you've been watching those outside women act their parts so very convincingly that you no longer know how crude and graceless you yourself are, barely capable of stirring any response in a person. Next time, you should go find more imperial physicians to treat it. If they can't cure it, then come and learn from the regent prince. He knows everything. He'll have enough to teach you for years. He hated my dirty tricks, so I deliberately offered him the cup I had already drunk from. He hated my betrayal, so I sat before him, carefully stitching padded gloves and knee guards for Wei Zhaoxing. All the stifled, choking grievances that had once made me weep without end, now I poured them back onto him, piece by piece. Watching him wither and fade visibly with each passing day, I finally felt as if I were being pulled out of the putrid swamp. The stone in my chest at last dissolved. I lived again. My wet nurse held me and wept a long while. She had feared I would go mad and die. But in the end I went mad and lived out all my remaining years. On the 3rd day, the letter of divorce arrived, and Wei Zhaoxing's carriage was already waiting outside the gate. As I stepped out of the manor, Xie Qingfeng called after me from behind, "He won't bring you happiness. A man like him has only a momentary interest. He enjoys the feeling of taking another man's wife. Do you think he truly loves you? Shen Shuyu, you will regret this. Whether I'll regret it or not I didn't yet know. But the one who clearly regretted was him." He stood there watching the carriage grow farther and farther away, and for a long while would not go back inside. "Have you vented enough?" Wei Zhaoxing asked gently, drawing me into his arms, his tone as tender as ever. I suddenly thought of the Xie family, of Xie Qingfeng. Like a breath that had been choking heavily in my chest for so long, it had dissolved with them. Completely. Dissolved to such a degree that when I turned to look back, I felt an unusual and strange calm. Wei Zhaoxing knew my heart well. He rested his chin on my shoulder, lowered his voice. "From now on, live well." Miss Cui of Qinghe had her engagement cancelled, and her reputation collapsed along with it. She came from a great family, raised with care, cleverer than most, with no lack of methods. Knowing clearly that Zhao Qingsun was behind the scheme, she said not a word of blame, only quietly caused the horse pulling Zhao's blessing carriage to be startled. The maddened horse dragged Zhao Qingsun an entire block, killing the child in her belly, leaving half her face scraped and ravaged. Xie Qingfeng at first felt a pang of grief, but when he saw the face twisted into something grotesque and horrifying, only fear remained. He fled like the wind, forgetting every promise and every past affection. Zhao Qingsun stumbled to the Xie manor to confront him, only to be beaten and kicked away at the door like a dead dog. People thought I should be jubilant, vindicated. But I could not bring myself to laugh. The debt of a fickle man's romantic indulgences was, in the end, paid for with the entire lives of women. They say fighting in the rear courtyard is simply how things are, because a woman's future is contained entirely behind the closed doors of that courtyard. My wet nurse said, "Not everyone meets a man like the regent prince. In this world, most men are only Xie Qingfeng, and women have no right to choose." I had thought for a long time, and suddenly wanted, for the sake of 10,000 and more women confined in rear courtyards like Shinshuyu, to find another way to live. I ran my hand across my portraits hanging in Wei Zhaoxing's study, and spoke quietly, toward the spot where he was hiding in the shadows. If women could also sit the imperial examinations and step onto the court, perhaps I would never have learned needlework. Never been forced to read the women's conduct manuals, never been pressed by the world to marry and submit to endurance, until slowly going mad. Xing, tell me. Who can save me and all those like me? He furrowed his brows deeply, his eyes full of sorrow, and every word landed in the deepest part of my heart. Shuyu, whatever you want to do, I will go with you. He loved me with all his sincerity and effort. Before this, he had gone to Jiangnan to find a young woman who matched my portrait exactly. The bet was real. Losing to him was real. And the wish to flee in those early days, that too was real. But I looked into those eyes full of deep and tenderness, carrying within them a trace of hurt, and said with certainty, "Can women sit the imperial examinations and serve as court officials? If it is truly too difficult, then let it be." He was silent for a long while, then asked in a low, steady voice, "You want to sit the examinations?" I shook my head gently and smiled. "I already have you, but they don't. If I can use this very body to step into the game, to open a bright and shining path for the women of the world, then let Shinshuyu go once in their place." A few days before my wedding to Wei Zhaoxing, Xie Qingfeng went mad and charged straight into the Shen household. He didn't believe that a woman like me, once divorced, could truly marry into the regent prince's residence. He couldn't believe that with a single word from me, the regent prince had defied 10,000 obstacles for my sake, establishing a women's school, fulfilling my wish. He couldn't believe Wei Zhaoxing was truly sincere with me. He asked me, "Didn't you say you don't trust men? Didn't you say all crows under heaven are equally black? Then why are you marrying him? Aren't you afraid he'll take 3 wives and 4 concubines? Afraid he'll be filthy and faithless and treacherous? Afraid he'll lock you in a rear courtyard for the rest of your life?" I was afraid. And yet I had already given 10,000 women the chance to stand shoulder to shoulder with men, to walk out the rear courtyard door, to reach toward a broader future. They rose to court, sat above 10,000 people, galloping freely, pointing at rivers and mountains, swaggering through the world and taking what was theirs. They are my armor and my shield. So I am no longer afraid. I lowered my gaze and looked at him, my tone mild and remote. That day, I made a bet with the regent prince. If you had dared to lift his carriage curtain, would have won, and taken the letter of divorce and left. But you didn't dare. So I lost. You once taught me, a person must keep their word. If you dare to bet, you must dare to lose gracefully. I staked myself for the regent prince, and I am willing. Every expression on Xie Qingfeng's face went blank. A cold wind swept through him. He trembled like a clay figure about to crumble, as if a single blow would shatter him to pieces. I brushed past him, took Wei Zhaoxing's hand, and walked into the rear courtyard. Together with A Zhu, we sat beneath the crabapple tree and drank until we were satisfied. A Zhu, his eyes already blurred with drink, looked toward Wei Zhaoxing. "I knew it was you. From the very first time we met, I knew. I was willing to risk my life to save you, not for a future, but because your power could protect my sister. She is timid and dares not let anything go freely. It was the Xie family that drove her to madness. I knew you were not like them. Please treat her well. The person you have waited and longed for through more than a decade, you must hold her in the palm of your hand." I have only one elder sister. She is someone I am willing to do anything for, even risk my life. He drunk too much. He collapsed over the stone table, and vaguely saw Wei Zhaoxing smiling as he walked toward me. My body light as air. He lifted me and gathered me into his arms. I have taken your words to heart. And I absolutely will not let her risk her life for me, the way she once did for Xie Qingfeng. He held me through the entire night without letting go. I was drunk beyond all measure. By the time I came to myself, the sky had already brightened. It was only then I learned that Xie Qingfeng had been standing in a daze outside the manor gate, howling through the entire night. He had forgotten that he and I had long since had nothing to do with each other, still raging madly and demanding Wei Zhaoxing to leave, delirious in his wish to bring me back to the manor. The result was that Azhu beat him black and blue, and still he refused to go. Carrying that wretched, shattered look of his, he asked me haltingly, "It isn't real, is it?" I smiled. "My lord, why are you here? Surely you are not unable to accept your loss. Every night I spend in passionate indulgence, drunk to dreamland. Does the young lord think that is real?" He choked and spat out a mouthful of blood, and was carried back to the manor. That evening, Azhu encountered assassins on Chang'an Street. It was Lady Xie. She had lost all her life, and so she would not allow me to win either. She wanted me to lose the person most important to me, the way I had once caused her to lose the son she loved most. But this time, I would not yield. Not long after, evidence of Prince Ning's factional scheming and personal profiteering, and evidence of imperial consort Xie's treasonous collusion, were presented to the court. Prince Ning was sentenced to die, while imperial consort Xie was executed by strangulation. The Xie manor was implicated, assets stripped and the family exiled. Xie Qingfeng cursed Wei Zhaoxing for going back on his word. Wei Zhaoxing smiled and replied, "What I gave you that day was a letter I drafted myself, simply guessing at the meaning. Written to look exactly like your aunt's handwriting. But the letter presented to the court today is real." Those words went straight through Xie Qingfeng's heart. He spat blood and fury, but no longer had any chance to rage, alone, solitary, and alone for all his life. Xie Qingfeng was exiled to the south, in fulfillment of the very oath he had sworn in his youth. He dragged his ruined body through life until 65, but not a single one of those days was anything that could be called good. He never understood where exactly he had gone wrong. He believed all men were this way, only he had truly loved so much he had indulged her, and in the end lost everything so completely. Later, when the county official who came on inspection rounds was a woman who had risen through the imperial examinations, and people spoke of her, they called her Lady Shuyu, not Lady Wei. Only then did he seem to truly understand. He had once loved her, but he had not known how to love. From childhood he had possessed everything: illustrious birth, talent, position. Everything had gone smoothly, and no one had ever asked him to yield, to stand in another's place and understand. To seek out the hurt and sensitivity hidden beneath her calm exterior. He had not been capable of it. But Wei Zhaoxing had been. Lady Shuyu had dared to stand forth and recommend that women sit the examinations and enter court service. What she had wanted was never love or indulgence. What she wanted was respect, a worthy name, and for all women under heaven to have a name and a future of their own. He had not understood. He could not do it. He had not even had the courage to defy convention for her sake. So it turned out, in that wager from that year, the one who lost completely, from beginning to end, had never been her. It was him, Xie Qingfeng. Epilogue. contrary to what I and everyone under heaven had imagined. The young emperor held Wei Zhaoxing in profound respect. The matter of women sitting the imperial examinations and entering court service was pushed forward smoothly. He also, as he had always wished, cultivated a trusted minister he could rely on for an entire dynasty. He said, "In the imperial palace there is no true feeling. Emperor brothers are all rivals. Only A Xing is truly my elder brother." He also said, "Asa, elder brother truly cares for sister-in-law deeply. The person he has hated most in his life he has never dared to touch, simply for fear of causing sister-in-law pain. He has held back, unable to bring himself to act. I know sister-in-law's feelings for elder brother are less love than use, but elder brother truly is a good man. Even if you use him, please treat him a little better. He is willingly, gladly the fool before you, so foolish that knowing perfectly well he is being used, he still personally hands himself over. A Zhu only has you, and I only have him. Please." I watched the figure striding quickly through the heavy snow, wading through layer after layer of thick white, hurrying to find me. It was Wei Zhaoxing. The young emperor choked on his words. The storms of this world have never stopped. But he has always been the one holding an umbrella to shield me, and you. The wind gusted in bursts, sweeping great goosefeather flakes of snow. Wei Zhaoxing wore a thick fur robe, holding aloft an oil paper umbrella, wrapped so entirely in swirling snow that he looked thin and small. The umbrella tilted to one side, revealing the tip of his nose already reddened by the cold. His voice came out soft and slightly hoarse. "Shu Yu, I've come to take you home." I smiled and reached out my hand, holding his tightly. Fingers interlaced. "Hold on firmly. The road ahead is long and covered in snow. Through all this life, don't let go, and if you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Love Stories with Lisa for more stories. Thank you so much.